the black sheep of a high-ranking noble family. The man who ruled Sylvania Academy like a king. Ed Rothstaler. A name feared, hated, and whispered behind closed doors. He abused his authority, insulted students without restraint, and even dared to use foul language in the presence of the Honorable Princess Penia herself. Worse still, he tampered with the Academy's sacred entrance examination out of petty jealousy and arrogance. For the prestigious Rothstaler family, it was the final disgrace they could no longer tolerate. And so, without hesitation, they disowned him. His dormitory was stripped away. His possessions were thrown out like garbage. His status vanished overnight. Students watched from a distance as he walked through the academy grounds carrying the remnants of his life. Look, isn't that Ed Rothstaler? Don't stare. He might notice. Who cares anymore? He got kicked out of the dormitory. I heard he tampered with the entrance exams. Serves that dirty noble bastard right. Ed listened silently as the voices followed him like shadows. But there was one problem. The arrogant Ed Rothstaler they hated was no longer him. Because inside that body was someone else entirely. Someone who had awakened in a world he recognized all too well. A world from a game. Sylvania's failed swordmaster. His favorite game. He had played through it 5 times, memorized its roots, its characters, its hidden events. Normally, people transported into games became heroes, prodigies, legendary hunters, or heirs blessed with overwhelming power. But fate had mocked him. Instead of the protagonist, he had become a third-rate villain with barely any screen time. A pathetic noble who appeared only at the beginning of the story before disappearing into ruin. And worst of all, he had arrived at the exact moment Ed Rothstaler's life collapsed. Strength, 3. Intelligence, 4. Dexterity, 7. Willpower, 7. Even ordinary farmers had better stats. Ed was supposed to belong to the magic department, yet his intelligence was laughably low. His strength was pitiful even by noble standards. In the original game, he existed only to be hated before fading into irrelevance. Then he remembered something else. At the very end credits of the game, Ed Rothstaler appeared one final time. As a beggar starving in the streets. A useless rich boy abandoned by his family with no skills to survive. It had been a miracle he lived that long. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Why had he become this character? There was no answer. But one thing was certain. He refused to accept that ending. If survival was the only path left to him, then he would survive no matter what. Sylvania Academy stretched across the entirety of Akan Island, more like a city than a school. Far to the northeast, hidden beyond the main grounds, lay an undeveloped forest untouched by most students. That was where Ed wandered. He spent half a day walking simply to escape the contemptuous gazes of others. By the time he stopped, reality had finally settled in. This was the beginning of the game. Fortunately, although Ed had been disowned, he had not yet been expelled from Sylvania Academy. That alone changed everything. Because in this world, graduating from Sylvania guaranteed a future of wealth, influence, and opportunity. And since the story itself took place inside the academy, he could use the knowledge from his previous life to survive. As long as he graduated. That became his goal. But first, there were more immediate problems. Food. Clothing. Shelter. The basics of survival. The few belongings he carried would last perhaps a week at most. After that, he would have nothing. Finding work would be difficult. Ed's reputation was infamous throughout the academy, and returning to the dormitories was impossible. At least there was a stream nearby. That was enough to start. Using the little magic he possessed, Ed began constructing a crude shelter deep within the forest. Yet every spell exhausted him far more than expected. Magic consumed stamina. And hunger came quickly. They could have at least fed me before throwing me out. Days passed. His shelter slowly took shape, a miserable hut barely fit to protect him from the rain. But it was still something. He endured starvation, exhaustion, and isolation. 2 weeks remained before classes began. If he could survive until then, he might still have a chance. A scholarship. A future. A different ending. For the first time since awakening in this world, hope began to appear. And then, Ed Rothstaler? A familiar voice called out from behind him. Ed froze. Only then did he remember something important. The main characters of the game were here too. And standing before him was the very person responsible for driving Ed Rothstaler out of the dormitory in the first place.